welcome everybody. A little bit late, 7:39. Today is February 10th. Trying to bring up the agenda. Give me a second. Okay, maybe we should just go right to the pledge and then we can get going. How's that sound? Anybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Yep. Thank you. I'm like, it's one of those. It's weird because it was working earlier this afternoon. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We want to take the attendance, please.
Actually, Mayor, we ordinarily don't at a work session, but
I do this each time, don't I? I always think that's appropriate. Sorry about that, Stuart.
No problem at all. We do have, however, we have all 4 board members and the mayor, so we have a full crew tonight.
Okay. Sorry, give me another minute. I'm trying to get my... Okay. So we're good. I think that I'm turning this over to the village manager. Is that correct? Okay. Unless somebody has, maybe we should go through, if anybody has announcements. I actually don't, but if anybody else does, why don't we get that done and then we'll turn it over to the village manager.
I have one.
Thank you, Dana.
I always volunteer to go first. I don't know why. The first one is, it's been snowing a lot, and as my husband likes to remind me, please dig out your fire hydrants. It's supposed to snow again, but so that our firefighters can find them if, heaven forbid, they need to come to your block. So make sure you do that. And then also, Bethany Arts Community is continuing its month, Black History Month events, and this Saturday there's something coming up that I'm pretty interested in. It's an artist talk with Spencer Thomas. It's called Table Wizard Spitty Spin and the Separate 5 MCs, and it's the untold story of the beginning of Ossining hip hop. Now this is sponsored by Craven Jamaican and Ossining Innovates, and you can sign up for the webinar by going to the BethanyArtsCommunity.org website. And also I have made an appointment to go see the village historians exhibit at Bethany on local Black history, which is supposed to be amazing, right, Rika? It's pretty good.
It was, honestly, I went with Supervisor Levenberg. I'm just telling you, it's going to blow you away. There's stuff in there that you're just not going to see anywhere else. It's terrific. It really is. Maybe I shouldn't make it sound so great. I don't want any disappointments, but I'm just telling you, it's also about Ossining, the Ossining Black community. It's a rare find, and you should all go.
You have to sign up to make an appointment to go, again, on the Bethany Arts Community website.
You can also call them because they do limit the social distancing, but sometimes people do cancel. So a simple phone call, if they can take you in, they'll take you right in.
Okay.
Is that it, Dana?
Yep, that's it.
Great. Does anybody else looking around? Anybody? Going once, going twice, sold. Madam Manager.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. First on the agenda tonight is a briefing on our comprehensive plan update, along with a briefing on our draft generic environmental impact statement. So I'd like to introduce our comprehensive plan consultants. Tonight we have Frank Fish, Simon Cates, and Sylvia Delfalva, as well as Jaime Martinez, our Director of Planning. So with that, I would like to turn the meeting. Oh, I also want to say we have Pat Yost, who was the co-chair of the committee. How could I forget? And also trustees Lopez and Casada, who serve on the committee as well. So we have full court press here on the comprehensive plan, and we're very eager to hear the briefing. So.
I think, Simon, if we can bring up, I guess, the PowerPoint. We're just going to try to give you an overview of the plan as the committee's now finished it and sent it to you. And I think this first slide coming up just gives you sort of an overview, a very big overview of the plan objectives. And we've kind of labeled them down into 4 areas, but for tonight, and that is review the plan itself, the key issues. And then Simon's going to do some takeaways that we see from each chapter. And then and I'm very happy Pat is here, and Melissa may join him, and that is Pat's going to give an overview of the steering committee's process that they used. And then I'm just going to give a brief summary of the draft generic environmental impact statement, and then just turn it back to all of you for discussion. So with that, maybe I will just start here with the next slide, which just gets into some key issues with the comprehensive plan. One, we were asked tonight to just give a highlight briefing, so just going to emphasize what we see as sort of some overarching features of the plan. The first here is a focus on improving the lives of Ossining residents. That has a lot of permutations to it. All the chapters of the plan, which I'll get to in a minute, tend to deal with that, but it's an overarching strategy or objective. And then secondly is to boost economic development and expand the tax base. That has a focus not only on downtown, but on other commercial areas of the village as well. And then throughout the plan, there is an emphasis on sustainability, environmental sustainability. That particularly comes out a little bit more in a chapter called Sustainable Infrastructure, which I'll get to in a minute. And then finally, neighborhood preservation, which includes housing and preservation for a range of housing, for young people, seniors, for people who are of more modest means or affordable housing. So those are the 4 overarching components of the plan. And the next slide just gives you, some of you are aware of this because we have early on, I think at our first committee meeting or second, we may have discussed this, but we're building very much on your 2009 plan, and then things that happened since the 2009 plan. You've had other studies that have been done, for instance, of downtown. You had committees looking at that, and you had a Kevin Dworka study in housing. So we've taken a lot into consideration, but we based this on your 2009 plan. It had 8 chapters, and when we looked through it, we thought that given the emphasis of some of our first meetings, that it was missing, I shouldn't say it was missing, it was just we thought it would be good to add 2 chapters, so we did, with the, sort of advice of both early meetings with the trustees and the committee. We've added a land use and zoning chapter, that chapter 3 there, as you can see Simon's highlighting. And then we added a chapter 10 because we felt the plan needed a conclusion, needed a future land use map, needed sort of an action agenda and an implementation section. So we build on the 2009 plan, we've added a little bit to it, 2 chapters. And of course, the other chapters are all updated with the committee. So that's the overall comparison and basis. And at this point, I'm going to now turn it to Simon. I want to credit Simon for being a major writer of the plan. And I want to credit Sylvia later. She's been the major writer of the DEIS. So Simon, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Frank. It's great to see you all again. As Frank mentioned, I'm going to just go through a couple of key takeaways that we think are some of the major things to highlight for each of the chapters. There's 10 chapters, so I'll just spend a a short bit of time on each of them, and then I'll turn it to Pat, and then we'll wrap up, and hopefully we have plenty of time to answer any questions that you all have. First, on chapter 1, the introduction and executive summary, it starts out hopefully setting the stage for what the key focuses of the plan are. It's got an intro. You know, for some people, what is a comprehensive plan is an important starting point, setting expectations and understanding what the document is about. It goes into the public outreach process, and the end of this chapter, it sort of extracts the sort of vision and goals, objectives and strategies from later on in the plan. The one thing I'd really like to highlight here for chapter 1 is, you know, we know that the document is hefty if you look at the full thing. For anybody who's interested in, hey, how can I get a snapshot of what this document is about? This is a great place to start. If you read through chapter 1, which hopefully is pretty manageable just by itself, you'll be able to see what the plan says, and the objectives and strategies, which we summarize here in chapter 1. That's really the bulk of what the plan is about. That's the you know, that's what, when you think about implementing a comprehensive plan, that's what we're talking about. So for anybody who wants a snapshot about what the plan is saying, you know, but maybe doesn't have the time to read through the full 200 plus pages, I would direct you here. Don't be dissuaded by the length of the plan. Start with chapter 1, and that's a way that you can really get into any other key issues that you want to focus on. Chapter 2, the village and regional overview. This is a really important starting point for us whenever we start a comprehensive plan. It sets a framework for what the existing conditions are. We start digging into demographic data, economic data. We look at regional issues that we're aware of that affect the village of Ossining, and also recent planning studies that the village has done that we can build upon, and any planning work in neighboring communities that could affect the work that we do with all of you. Then in chapter 3, we start getting into the substantive chapters that end with those objectives and strategies that you ultimately want to implement in the plan. In chapter 3 here is land use and zoning. A couple of the key takeaways. Number 1, generally the land use regulations that the plan recommends are incremental to what exists now. We don't see anything that's dramatic, but the objective behind them is to create more positive outcomes for Ossining's neighborhoods, improve quality of life, reducing barriers for existing property owners, things like that to improve those existing neighborhoods. The 2 key recommendations that came from this chapter, we think, are the form-based overlay for downtown and the Croton Avenue corridor. The goal here is for new development that happens in these areas to create a more positive public realm. Whenever a new building goes in, that's what a form-based overlay is trying to do, is to create private development that makes a more beneficial public realm for people who experience a building from the sidewalk or from the street. And then the revisions that the plan recommends in the T district and the S75, which are the other 2 major recommendations here, are meant to reduce pre-existing nonconformities. What that means is that you may have property owners who could struggle to or have barriers before them to improve an existing property. And the goal here was to remove those barriers, to make it easier for somebody to improve a property and improve the general neighborhood. These are, these zoning recommendations are critical to the plan, we think. We have another briefing with you, I believe it's on February 24th, to get into the nitty gritty of zoning. Not that we won't take zoning questions from you tonight, but I just want to stick a pin in that and remind everyone that we'll be back here in 2 weeks to talk to you specifically about zoning as well. Chapter 4 is focused on the waterfront. Now, when we got into the waterfront, and I think Sylvia did a great job here in doing most of the writing on this chapter, there's a tough balance down here between very important issues, and we tried to strike that balance. The two issues are, we know that there's a need to continue to leverage Ossinings's train station, the economic assets that you have down by the waterfront already, the Hudson River coastline, the parks, and so on, but also understanding the risks of climate change and sea level rise. And so those were always in the back of our mind as we looked at issues down here. So some of the things that we talked about are continuing to think about the area east of the tracks that I'm highlighting over here as a mixed use neighborhood as it is now. Recommending a waterfront resilience area that's more focused on conservation west of the tracks, the areas that are most at risk now for flooding and in the future for sea level rise. And also I'm recommending climate adaptive interventions in the future so that residents and businesses are protected from flooding and sea level rise going forward as well. Chapter 5 is about economic development. The one thing I want to highlight here is that, you know, the 09 plan called this Downtown Crescent and Economic Development. We initially called this chapter the Downtown and Economic Development. But one of the things that we've heard throughout the process, and we think was a good suggestion, is the chapter itself and the way that we wrote it wasn't really just about the downtown. The downtown is not Ossinings's only economic resource, and so the suggestion that we heard a few times was to refocus this chapter or reframe it anyway, so that it doesn't seem like it's just about the downtown. It is about the downtown. That's one of your key economic resources, but it's also about the waterfront, the Upper Croton corridor, and Highland Avenue, as these other parts of the village that are part of the business community as well. Chapter 6 is focused on transportation. Another place where we need to think about a sense of balance. And the question here is, what are improvements that the village of Ossining has jurisdiction over and can make yourself if you want to make them, versus other improvements that you don't have jurisdiction over? And the big one here is something like Route 9, where what the plan says is more of an advocacy position. Here's what we want to do. We know that we need to press state DOT in order to make those improvements. So it's important to understand that distinction. There are certainly recommendations to make the downtown more walkable, to help support local businesses. That's where you've got control. And then there's other recommendations that necessarily have to focus on what type of position that we can take in order to advocate for others to make changes that are better for the village. Chapter 7 is the chapter is called Sustainable Infrastructure. Frank mentioned this a moment ago. This chapter covers a lot of different types of issues. The first one is utilities. So the first item here is continuing efforts to improve the village's water, stormwater, and sewer systems, which working with our engineer, we found are generally in good shape, but the village was doing good work on continuing to improve those. We talk about issues related to the school district. We met with the school board, and from data that we received from the school district, learned that the district itself projects declining enrollment going forward. Met with a lot of different municipal staff, and so one example here is the third bullet point, where we talk about, again, a sense of balance, right? Where can the village be more efficient with its resources? For example, consolidating fire stations in this case, but also what are the necessary improvements that need to be made? And for example, there may be capital improvements such as new facilities as well. And then the last item is focused on preserving existing open space. But another idea that we heard about, which we added into the plan, as an idea for the future is creating an open space plan that can continue going forward to identify improvements to the village's open space resources and expansions as well. Chapter 8 is focused on housing and neighborhood preservation. And the key takeaway here that really guided everything else was the need to sort of preserve existing neighborhood quality or improve neighborhood quality for Ossinin's existing residents. And that took a few different strategies. We looked at ways to improve or expand code enforcement, opportunities to expand affordable housing resources. This is something that the village has been working on for years. It's not a new idea, but strategies to continue that work. And where possible, what smaller improvements could be made in the code to improve quality of life in neighborhoods. And here we get into some crossover between some of the zoning ideas that I talked about before, that we think can help improve housing stock and neighborhood quality of life, for example, in the T-zone. Chapter 9 is focused on cultural and historic resources, and this is another area where we had great conversations through our subcommittee meetings with representatives of different arts and cultural groups and historic organizations, and learned about, for example, really the burgeoning arts scene in Ossining, and thinking about ways that the plan can help to help that community grow and become more and more of a benefit for residents and also an attraction for others around the region. And then finally, as Frank mentioned, there's a chapter that was not included in your 2009 plan that we think is important. It's something that we like to include in comprehensive plans, and it's an implementation focused or an action focused chapter that circles back to all of the objectives and strategies in your plan and thinks about how they can be implemented. It also includes what's called a future land use map, which you see here on the right side of the screen. And the future land use map shows a sort of a generalized, not parcel by parcel, but more neighborhood by neighborhood look at what the general neighborhood character in terms of land use is likely to be based on what the recommendations in the plan are. And the key takeaways here are that the village's existing land use patterns are generally going to stay the same, right? The plan's not recommending that you turn a residential neighborhood into a single family residential neighborhood into a multifamily neighborhood, right? There's nothing like that. But there are some incremental tweaks to land use regulations to hopefully improve quality of life in some of those neighborhoods. The third item here, I mentioned before that waterfront resiliency area west of the Metro North tracks. We show that down here in green, right? Reinforcing downtown as a mixed use district. That's one of the objectives of that form-based overlay that I mentioned, right? The form-based overlay is not intended to dramatically overhaul the downtown. It's really intended to enforce the historical feel that's there. And then the two last items here that I wanted to focus on are some other things that we say in this action agenda and implementation chapter. Number one, the plan recommends that it be updated every 10 years. That's a general rule of thumb to try to keep a plan current. Your last plan is from 2009, so you're doing pretty well just by having us here tonight. But that's something that the village we think ought to try to achieve going forward as well. And the second one is something that we've talked about with the steering committee, which is recommending that the steering committee remain in place, so that the plan isn't next review 10 years down the road, right? This could be a way that the steering committee could monitor progress of implementation of the plan, and could, for example, come back and report to the trustees on an annual basis as one way that we've recommended in the past, to talk about, all right, here's what's been done in the past year. Great job, everyone. Here's what we think are the highest priorities to try to achieve in the next year. And we think that's a way to keep the document fresh and make sure that folks in the village and the trustees yourselves are able to review progress and make sure that you're staying on track in terms of implementing as much of the plan as you can. So that's a sort of a high level overview. We didn't want to take too much time going through this now, but I'm going to turn it to Pat now. He and Frank are going to wrap up, and then we're happy to take any questions from you. So Pat, take it away.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. So thanks to to BFJ and the team for all the support over the last many months as the steering committee kind of pulled together this draft to submit to y'all. The process started, I think, as many are aware, a long time ago, nearly a year ago, with some of the initial work relative to with Pace University to identify what some of the key needs were. We kept those in front view throughout the whole process. The steering committee is it's a really great group of folks who spent a lot of time and effort and energy, met on a regular basis monthly. Additionally, in order to try and get a little bit deeper in the specific topics or areas of interest or confusion, we held a series of what we called study halls, which were separate kind of conversations, a little bit less formal, and allowed the opportunity to really discuss things in topics and questions at a much more granular level. Additionally, as part of the process of gathering input, there were a significant number of other people outside of just the straight steering committee. There were a series of 6 subcommittees that were put together. I think a total of over about 60 people participated in those. Set up on a topic, a various set of topics of waterfront and environmental impact, housing, cultural and historic development, community services, infrastructure, and economic development. And those subcommittees each met twice, and once for county key input and second time to kind of circle back around with those. In addition to that, we took a lot of the input from, as Simon and Frank mentioned, a lot of the previous work that was been done. And then, throughout the course of the middle of last year, there was a survey that was sent out that we leveraged, as well as some online data gathering and input gathering tools. So, the end result of that is, help work with BFJ over the course of time to make edits and modify the document. They're incorporated into the steering committee draft, and then we had one last meeting the end of January to kind of say, yep, this is it, and submit to y'all from that perspective. So the draft that I think that y'all have, that is in place and has been is the final draft, which includes the input that we provided to BFJ, especially in this last round of edits. So I just want to say once again thanks to everybody who participated, and everybody who's on the steering committee, plus all the people who spent their time to participate on the working subcommittees. From the input, it was really valuable. So thanks a lot. And then Frank, you'll talk a little bit about.
Great. Thank you, Pat. This slide would we only have one slide on the DGIS, but I want to just try to summarize a little bit of what you've received. And I want to thank Jaime for reviewing it as your planner to make sure that we got this right. And also Sylvia for largely doing the charts, the tables, the research in it. And finally, we've been coordinating with Stuart to make sure that we follow the process carefully. The State Environmental Quality Review Act is a bit of they call it a strict construction act. So to make sure that we do follow the procedures, and the trustees have, you've You declared yourself lead agency over last summer. We did an environmental assessment form. You evaluated that, and then you did a positive declaration that you would do a full EIS. And so the purpose of the draft generic environmental impact statement that you have now is to highlight the potential impacts of adopting the plan and those associated zoning in terms of the overlay district, the T-zone, the S75. You can see here that the analysis, we feel, as you go through the EIS, is really going to show that environmental protection has been achieved, that we try, for instance, with the future land use map, which Simon reviewed for you, to mitigate impacts of sea level rise by protecting with a very special designation on sustainability, everything west of the tracks along the Hudson River. We tried to also provide more zoning flexibility to benefit residents and also the existing tax base. However, one of your judgments in just acting on the DEIS, which I'll get to in a minute, is to see that it meets the scoping document. You did a scope after you did a positive declaration last year. If you all recall, you then had a scoping session, and that scope guided the EIS, because the scope is really an outline for the EIS, and it just organizes the EIS into 6 general chapters, and we've got those in the EIS. But you pointed out 2 that were important. One was traffic, and one was the school district. And so we looked at the relative impacts of particularly the overlay district, which has an incentive in it for going from 4 to 5 stories, and also the 2-family district, the T district, where some of the improvements we've suggested, if they're carried out, they could marginally add to some units. It turns out there are very few. We tried to look at that incremental increase over the next 10 years of the plan. It's relatively very little. You can see here at the bottom, we've got a range there of about 67 to 83 units. We're comparing that, by the way, when we say incremental, you sort of look at what we call soft sites. As you know, we, in our walking tours, we sort of describe some soft sites to everybody. Sites that are vacant or might be developed over time. But we had to compare that with what can you do under existing zoning to what's the increment you could do under the zoning that's proposed in the overlay and the T-zone. And actually, this build out shows very little, there's very little difference. There is a difference. It does slightly increase number of units over time, over the next 10 years. If our estimates, we think our estimates are fairly conservative in the sense that we think this is probably the maximum number or range. And then if you study that, and George Jacquemart took a look at that in terms of traffic and traffic impacts, because those soft sites are spread throughout downtown and the Croton overlay district and the T-zone, that's a large area. And with that, with those number of units, you get relatively little traffic impact at any one given intersection. So the traffic impacts are spread out and are minor in George's view. They never change a level of service at any intersection. And then we looked particularly at schools, because schools, and we met, as you know, with the school board. We did get the school district's own projections, which we show here on the far right, which, in the next 5 years, they project a decrease of 138 public school children. We think that the incremental difference of the zoning changes that have been suggested, you can see here, are maybe 14 to 15 new public school children over the next 10 years. So basically, this is going to impact slightly the decrease, the projected decrease in public school children, but the district, if their study is correct, it's done by a very reputable group out of Western Suffolk BOCES, then this will have no significant impact. So we conclude in the EIS that really the impacts of doing this overall to the village are beneficial. The two impacts you asked, it's a very focus on a very specific way. There are some traffic impacts. They won't change a level of service at any intersection. There are some school impacts, but they're minor compared to the decrease in enrollment that the district's consultants project. So that's the overall finding of the DGIS. I might mention to you here that we're hoping that you can read through this and if you're, because the next thing we hope to discuss with you on the 17th, February 17th is sort of acceptance of the FGEIS. And by the way, all acceptance means is you find that, yes, it does follow the scope and it's organized the way you expected it to be in the scope, and that therefore it's ready for public distribution so that the public can then see it. And then the DGIS state law requires a 30-day comment period on the EIS. You can extend that if you wish. And in fact, we suggest you do maybe a 45-day or 60-day comment period, just so everybody has plenty of time to make comments. And I think that gets me to the next slide and our last slide. So and I want to put this up. Stuart, you asked us to end, or not end necessarily, but to cover the dates that I think you and the manager's office and Jaime worked out a little bit, and we worked out for an overall plan to look toward getting this work done this spring. The only requirement you should be aware of is that the trustees, by the way, state law, as I described before, on comprehensive plans in New York State is fairly liberal or fairly flexible. It gives you tremendous discretion, but every once in a while in state law, it has a deadline, and you've reached one you should all know about, and that is state law says that when the committee transmits to you their draft, you have to be able to review it and hold your own public hearing within 90 days of getting that draft. So that's why January 29th is kind of important as a date here. That's when, as Pat went over, the committee sent to you the plan. So state law just doesn't require you to adopt the plan or anything. It just requires you to hold the public hearing within 90 days. And we think this schedule can achieve that. We're hoping that at your, we're at the trustee briefing tonight, that at your legislative session next week, you'd be in a position to accept the DGIS. And that's all it is. It's accepting it purely for purposes of public distribution so that the public can get it. Theoretically, under Sinker, right now the DGIS is considered a document that hasn't been sent to the public yet, that it has to go through you because you're the lead agency, and you have to determine it's okay in terms of what the scope called for it to do. And then if you do that next week, we are suggesting that you might even keep it open. Sinker requires 30-day comment period. That maybe you keep it open a little bit longer, maybe as much as 45 or 60 days. And the other decision you have to make on that is whether you want to hold a hearing on the DGIS also, as well as a hearing on the plan and on the zoning. We found in the past, I'll spend just a brief moment on this, that when you have a hearing on the plan and the zoning at the same time as is being suggested later here on at the end of March and into April, that it's hard for us to distinguish. It gets very difficult to distinguish what's a comment on the DGIS versus what's a comment on the plan and the zoning. Most people tend to be very focused on the plan and the zoning, and particularly the zoning, what they might or might not agree with. And so it's hard sometimes to answer in the final environmental impact statement, the comments. That's why we like to suggest, and would suggest to you that if you set a written comment period for the public, then we have all the comments in writing and we can actually address them. Our job is, the lead agency's job is to address all the written comments in an FEIS. So that would be a decision to make, acceptance of the DGIS next week, February 17th at your legislative session, and then decide on a period. It must be at least 30 days for comment. We're suggesting you could keep it open 45 days or 60 days. And so that's one thing. And then on the 24th, we felt that, as Simon said, zoning has become an important part of this. And we thought zoning is where a lot of the trustee liaisons, both Trustee Casada had, for instance, a lot of questions on the zoning. We wanted to have a whole session with you on zoning, so we're hoping for that on February 24th. And then once that's all done, you'd have a chance to set a public hearing on March 3rd. Now, obviously there, as we get comments back from you tonight and next week on the 24th, as we get comments back, we would make those revisions that you want and put them in the draft plan. And then if you set a public hearing, it gives us time to then refer it. It has to go to the planning board, your planning board, and also by a little section of state law called 239M, it has to go to Westchester County for their review. Both reviews are discretionary in the sense of both of those agencies, but we needed to get it out to them. On March 23rd, that would allow the planning board at their meeting to discuss the proposed changes. And then on the 31st, the thought was to have maybe a special session of your board for the public hearing on the plan and the zoning together. And then if you needed it on sort of April 14th, you could have an extended session on that public hearing if necessary also.
Frank, can I just quickly jump in here?
I think that's on April 7th, is that right?
April 7th, yes. So,
Yep.
April 7th would be, sometimes some boards want a second, a second date of a public hearing if more people want to comment. So we thought that April 7th could be a backup date for a continuation of the public hearing. The April 14th date would be, we would come back to you and talk about, here are the comments that we heard from the public, and you would give us some guidance on what types of changes to make.
Right. So the missing date here is just April 7th. So we wanted to reserve that as an open date. It is possible that you might get through the whole public hearing on the 31st and not need April 7th. But if you do, we want to have an open date for you to have the extension of the public hearing. And then April 4th, as Simon just said, be discussion of the plan and zoning changes, further plan changes and zoning changes you might want as a result of the hearing. And then in April, the remainder of April, we'd revise, make the revisions you wanted so that you could see those revisions. We'd get them back to you. And also then when we kind of know the revisions, we're able to write up the final generic environmental impact statement for you, so that on your legislative session, May 5th, you could accept the FGIS, and then you would essentially be getting everything ready. You'd have the revised draft plan, the zoning revisions. They'd be ready for adoption, but you can't adopt them until you actually make, and we think this could be done on the 19th of May, seeker findings at your legislative session, and then you could adopt the plan and the zoning. So that's the overall schedule. I'm sorry to be a little bit lengthy on that, but and I think you've had this. I want to thank Jaime again for sending this whole schedule to you some weeks ago, but we just wanted to highlight it tonight because I've been told by both Karen and Stuart and others that you have a very busy set of things to think about beyond this at some of your sessions. So we're hoping to just get these down in this schedule. So Thank you all, and we want to turn this back. Mayor, I guess I would turn this back to you and for discussion with the trustees.
Mayor, I think you're on mute.
I was saying to myself, of course I am. I normally, why don't we go back to gallery, but you just be ready to set us right back into plans. So let me thank Pat and the entire committee, getting volunteers to really participate on things that I think are pretty complicated, actually. I've been doing this for a few years. I find it you know, like you got to really dig deep, and most volunteers have to go to work during the day. They're running into a Zoom meeting, they're running out, they've got other things going on. There are actually a number of critical and very intense initiatives going on in the village right now. Some of the people, I looked at the names, sort of attend more than one thing. So I really want to thank everyone who's been involved with it. Obviously, Pat is the speaker tonight, but there were clearly lots of people. I saw on the website the number of subcommittees. So thank you for that, and thank you to the staff. Frank, always nice to see you, and company. Hi, Sylvia. I never get to see you. So this is great. I've got some questions. I am going to let others go first, though. I wanted to do a housekeeping piece on the presentation and then open it up to my colleagues to speak before me. Number one, all the acronyms on presentations like this, especially since they're public, either have a key on the last page or the first place, but DGIS, all of that stuff really should be written out. And I know it's a pain in the neck, but they really should be, because they don't mean much unless they are. And some people are never going to read the chapters. They're just going to see these presentations and look at them. So I appreciate that. All of the maps that you use, it would be helpful to have a key there as well. So that there is a sizing issue. You know, when you flip from one page to the other, one thing is a 2 mile square area, and the next page it's a half a mile square area, and the proportion of maps to one to another for the average person like myself is helpful when you, I mean, after all, what is a presentation? It is a story, a journey that you take people on. So there should be some consistencies that the average person reading this would understand it, you know, as a story that you're trying to tell about all the pieces. That was just my housekeeping piece that I would appreciate. Obviously, it's a PowerPoint. In other ways, you could have links to many things, but just so that when the folks want to have some bedtime reading and they're looking at this PowerPoint, I'd like them to hear the story that you have to tell. I'm going to open it up and leave my questions to the end. And if I'm lucky, my colleagues will ask all the right questions and I will have nothing to say at the end. So, and they'll cover it. Shall we do it alphabetical order, or should I just see a hand raised and see who would like to say something or have any questions in the gallery?
I'll go first. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Frank and Simon and Sylvia and the whole team for supporting us and putting this together. I've been working closely with you all since the beginning of this process, and I'm really pleased with where we are at this point and how much work has gone into it. One question that I have in terms of inclusiveness: we have a sizable part of our population that is Spanish speaking. And I realize that with a document like this that is many hundreds of pages long and in draft form, translating it is prohibitively expensive in many ways. I think translating the final version is something that we should definitely do, so that there is a Spanish language version of the comprehensive plan. But I would love to hear any options, at the very least for the first chapter, that has a summary of the recommendations and of what the comprehensive plan is. If that's something that can be translated into Spanish, I think could increase the kind of feedback that we get during this public comment period. Thanks.
Are we putting in all the questions, Frank, and you'll answer everything, or are you going
Oh,
one by
no,
one?
I'm sorry. Yes, I was writing it
Or
down.
anybody else in the gallery?
Yeah, no, I think we can take a crack at that. Omar's right to, and in fact, Karen could address this. She addressed it at one of our past discussions. It is very expensive to get into translating everything. For instance, it's a 250-page document with appendices. But I think Omar's request is very reasonable. We could have our people try to translate chapter 1 and get that done so that by the time you set the hearing, when we could have a chapter 1 in Spanish.
Thank you.
Omar, was that your question for the evening? Okay. Anybody else?
I do have a couple of them. I'm not going to be as brief as my colleague, Omar. I do want to thank everyone that actually was part of this, especially for the voluntary people that actually, took time from their schedule to be part of this team and actually get feedback and give feedback to a lot of the stuff that was going through. Frank, one of the things that I guess I had asked in the past was, and it kind of is going to go kind of piggyback into what Omar said, I had asked to get a pamphlet, sure, like with bullet points of each chapter where that could be translated into any language. Some people can actually see what chapter. They don't have to read the whole chapter. They just have to see the bullet points. And at some point in time, I remember Jaime was talking about something that New York City does. I haven't seen that. I'm not sure if you guys are going to be doing that or not. But I'll be curious to find out, because I had asked that a couple months back, and I thought that was going to get done, and I guess it hasn't. So the other portion of this, of your presentation was, you said if the board is in agreement, we can pass a resolution next week accepting the DHS as it stands right now. For argument's sake, and I guess this is just a question that I have. Let's say we don't agree with some of the chapters and some of the stuff that is being proposed to us as a draft. What happens then if we say this item we don't want to be part, we don't want this to be part of this, the whole overall draft? What happens then?
Then let us know, because on that discussion, if there's something in the DGIS you think is not according to the scope, that you changed your mind on, or you don't want, or it's not, we would then revise it because you are the lead agency. The trustees are, and then we would make those changes or revisions. So if you spot something ahead of time, that's why we sent it out to you a week or so back. That was the memo you got from Sophie, from Sylvia Dovava, and so we would make a change if there is something. And Manny, if you have anything, Trustee Casada, if you have anything this evening too for us to look at, we would certainly start looking at that right away.
So no, thank you. That's helpful. So the other question.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a clarifying question from you? Were you talking about changes to the DGIS, or were you talking about changes to the comprehensive plan?
I thought Trustee Casada was talking about changes to the DGIS, because that's the action item for next week.
Yeah, I mean, so the committee plan that's been transmitted to the Board of Trustees is the plan that's been transmitted. It can be changed if you have, a desire to see changes to it before it's passed. And the DGIS at this point would be looking at adopted in terms of whether it was complete and looking at reviewing all the items that needed to be reviewed. But if there are changes to the plan that then require additional changes to the EIS, that would be dealt with in the FGEIS process. So there's no, it's not like you've reached a point of no return. There still is the ability to provide comments, and those comments are thought of in the process that we're in the middle of right now. So you still have, opportunity to provide comments on the plan before it actually gets adopted by the Board of Trustees. And you have opportunities to provide commentary to the DGIS. I think that the big thing is about whether or not the scope of what was reviewed and analyzed is thorough enough or not. So if there's like, if you decide, hey, there should have been an entire analysis over this very large thing, it was totally disregarded, then that's a bigger issue for the DGIS. But if it's more a matter of, you know, I don't really like this policy in the comp plan, I think we should make adjustments to it. That's something that can get dealt with in the comment phase.
Yeah, and thank you, Jaime, because that was my follow-up question to that one, because obviously, you know, we can accept as it stands, and when we have the comment portion of this on the public hearing, you know, people in our community are going to come back to us and be like, why you guys are doing this, or why you guys are thinking, why are you doing this? So to me, that also be, like you just said, an opportunity for us to revise and be like, yeah, no, you guys are correct. You know, we should be looking at this way, not this way that it was presented as a draft, and then address that at that point. And then I'm assuming Frank and the team will revise that portion, or either eliminate it out of the plan or the draft at that point, or add to it as it's fit as a part of the public commentary portion itself.
Yes, Trustee Casada, that's exactly right. And the thing to emphasize too, that with the DGIS, the draft generic environmental impact statement, it's really something that is just evaluating what's in the plan and the zoning. And based upon all the public comments that you hear at the public hearing on the plan and the zoning, then we go back in, we first meet with you after that hearing, and then hear from you the comments. Then we have to go in and do a final. We do a final environmental impact statement based on your decisions. So that's final environmental impact statement won't come until after the public hearing, and also after we've met with you and, you know, hear all your comments and concerns. So the DGIS is just that, it's a draft. You don't actually, I think the state seeker manual, and Stuart will correct me on this, even goes to the extent of saying you don't have to agree with every sentence or everything in the DGIS as written. You have to make sure that the DGIS does cover the items in the scope that you passed, and that it's suitable in your mind for the public to receive so that they can get a copy of it and read through it. That's the key to acceptance on the DGIS. And, you know, as soon as you go to a public hearing and plan and zoning, after that, we're going to have to write the final environmental impact statement.
Okay. No, thank you for that clarification. Because yeah, I just want to be clear that next week when this comes in front of us, it's still a draft. It's not. It is a draft. It's not 100% approval until we hear the public comments, and then we'll, you know, obviously we'll address items as we go, and then we'll have the final. Which was part of the schedule as well. So those are just, again, this is just a brief questions. Obviously, there's more questions because you did talk about zoning and or things that I think we, like housekeeping stuff that we need to address that not at this time, but in another meetings. So, but I appreciate that. That's all the questions that I have right now. Thank you.
Dana, anything?
No, not really, not at this time. I did have a question about when you say neighborhood preservation, you're not talking about historic preservation. You're talking about preserving the character of the neighborhood for the people who live there now. Could you explain that to me, what you mean?
Yes, Trustee White, you're correct. In neighborhood preservation, a more broader term than solely historic. It encompasses historic, but we do deal with the historic preservation in a separate chapter. But on overall neighborhood preservation, we're trying hard to make, particularly in the single family areas, not any changes to those areas to, as best we can, preserve those areas, enhance the areas. And in the S75, there's some zoning suggestions to make it easier for homeowners in that area or in that zone to not have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for, you know, a porch, a front porch, an addition that might incur into a a side yard or a rear yard. Our understanding, and Jaime could better, or Pat, explain the genesis of this. They did a lot of work in this area, that a homeowner, that area, we believe, used to be another zone, and a zone that had smaller lots in it. And so our understanding is there's a lot of homeowners in that area that you have to go to the ZBA in order to do things and improve their houses. We're looking at some changes in that area that will simply allow them to follow closer to the older standard that was in the S50, and not have to go to the ZBA so often. So that's one example of trying to, allow homeowners to better take care of their property, add on a room, or, improve the property with less sort of paperwork.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of add into that, I think that for us, one of the loudest, really most consequential thing that we heard about this was that people love the village. The people who live in the village love the village. They like the character of the village. They like the height of the buildings. They like the scale of life in the village. And so it was really important that overall that there really be this focus on improving the quality of life where we could, and making sure that we had a comprehensive plan that called for policies and changes where necessary, but sort of preservation also where necessary to improve quality of life along the lines that people had expressed. And so you can even see in the presentation, Frank with the first bullet talked about sort of centering the population of people who reside in the village, and making sure that their needs and desires are sort of the centerpiece and the driving force of the plan. And so when we talk about neighborhood preservation, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think at the end of the day, if you're a property owner who is looking to fix the sidewalk next to your house, or putting down a stone path when you're trying to fix your driveway, you want to know that you're going to be able to go through that process and invest in your property. And so some of the changes that we've recommended are to help people do that in a way that is less difficult and less sort of regulatory, onerous than it is. But in other places, it's just about sort of, driving home that that people like the scale of the village. And so that's really a big driving force. So that's not to get too much into the specifics of the plan, which are really in the plan, but to kind of try to drive home the message that the comprehensive plan, pretty much in all facets, was an attempt to make sure that we centered that piece of it, with the consideration that economic development is something that is extremely important to the community. The environmental sustainability, being resilient against sea level rise, is extremely important to the community. That finding ways to preserve some of these historic properties that have, for one reason or another, fallen on hard times and have had difficulty to rehab their spaces, to help make sure that there's space in the community where they can continue to be a part of the community in an adaptive way as architectural features, even if those uses may have changed over the years. So, I don't know if that clears up kind of what we talk about when we're using the term neighborhood.
It sounds like a very wide-ranging term. Yeah. Okay. It means a lot of different things. Okay. That's it.
Bob? Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Were you saying something? Okay, Bob? Anything? Can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
There I am. I'll save my questions for the zoning section when we get to it.
Okay,
Right.
great. I think that covers everybody. Could you put the plan back up on the first part? Hold on one second, Willie. Too many people in my house all working. First one.
Back in the beginning.
Thank you.
Just tell me when to stop.
First slide, the beginning.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. Objectives, great. So let's go one more. Next one. I just want to make sure I read this correctly. Okay, so this is sort of the key issues that you addressed. Number 2, I've read a lot of the pages. The expand the tax base is not clear to me as I read the document. I don't need an answer on what tax base means. I don't, but if these are the key issues addressed, right? So to me, these are like, this is the problem we're solving for, or these are the questions we asked ourselves as we put this together, right? Strategies to improve lives, economic development, environmental, neighborhood, these are the key issues. Boost economic development, expand the tax base. First of all, those are not the same thing. Economic development and a tax base are actually not one thing. It's sort of interesting to me that's put there. But I did not see a lot of graphs, charts, and dollar signs next to end items that increase the tax base. The mostly mom and pop stores that we have, and in this comprehensive plan, I didn't see anything about large corporate base, because I don't think there's room left in the village for a significant size corporation or hospital. I mean, physically I don't, and I didn't see in the plan. So a lot of the small, light industrial, and what I call, and it's probably the wrong word, mom and pop, do not have a strong tax base. And even having more of them, I mean, I guess theoretically increases the tax base, but it really doesn't. So I'd be interested that you go through this plan and look at these things that you say are the key issues and see really whether you've answered where the tax base is actually increased and by how much it's increased. So that would be just one thing that popped for me as I sort of started a few weeks ago reading, look, this is a lot of pages. So I read a chapter here and there, I look at updates, to be honest, but it just struck me, one of them. Environmental sustainability for me, also another one that I found really interesting because it's so focused on the waterfront and the rising water and stuff, when in fact the village is much bigger than that. Honestly, how things are done throughout the village. So I saw a huge amount, not a huge amount, excuse me, I saw a lot on that, but not really what I would have thought in a village that's on the side of a cliff and the kind of products we use and all of that. And I know that you had people from the AC in the committees. So I know that they were there, and I know who they are, and I know how smart they are. So that was another area that I was just curious about. Again, I'm not looking for specific answers. I just would like you to look at this, and I may have missed it. So, it'll be great if somebody says, you missed this entire 4 paragraphs that talk about taxes, or 4 paragraphs that talk about this. Neighborhood preservation, I'm glad Dana White asked you the question. It oscillates between talking about neighborhoods, talking about preservation, and talking about changes. It's a very interesting 2 words, neighborhood preservation. It feels to me, and my sense is that those are words to combat words like, what's gone on in Brooklyn and in Queens with all the advancement that actually displaces people. And I cannot think of the words.
Gentrification?
Yes, thank you.
Overdevelopment, maybe also.
It feels to me like people on the committee didn't want that, and so they talked about neighborhood preservation, but I wasn't in these committees, so I'm reading into it. But I think the word neighborhood preservation needs definition, because these are words that sound, that they have a lot of gravitas, but honestly, as Dana just pointed out, can mean a lot of different things, and I'm not actually sure what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Can you go to the next one? I'm simply asking, not in this meeting, but to go back and think about some of this stuff. The comparison for 209 and 221, I love this. I'm glad you did this. I think it's so important that people understand that for 40 or 50 years, I would have actually put the one before that to show people how long it was. I mean, I know, and you know, that many municipalities, possibly most municipalities in the state of New York, don't do one every 10 years. It's expensive and time consuming, which means it's expensive and it's more expensive because time is very expensive. But I'm so happy that you did this comparison. Kudos, because this is oftentimes something that's really missing. in this. If you could go to the last page now, please. So I just wanted to share with you my thoughts about the presentation, because one of the things I'm learning is that oftentimes we do a lot of work, and our consultants do a lot of work, and our staff does a lot of work, and our volunteers do a lot of work, but we're not as great about communicating our stories to the public. And so I want to make sure that anything that is public tells not only a good story, but tells the accurate story that people can read and understand and walk away. I would appreciate if this proposed timeline adoption also give the trustees an asterisk or something that says this triggers that. This is your last chance to do that. We might have 90 days to do something, but I didn't hear that we had to close in 90 days. I just heard that we had to open within 90 days. So little timelines are really important because it's competing right now against two other major initiatives. And I say two because they're similar, very heavily involved in community engagement, public engagement, trustee involvement, staff involvement, and one will start cannibalizing another because there are just so many hours in a day. So it's very important for us to know when decisions have to be made and when it's too late to do something. And I do think that I'll say it publicly, and we'll have to say it at every meeting, this has been brought by a committee to the Board of Trustees. My understanding, and I'll say it at every meeting so that somebody has every opportunity to correct me, that this is not an up and down vote on a plan or recommendation. They're recommendations, and that the Board of Trustees will then vote on all of it at once, pieces of it, not want some of them, want other things, and change them. It's a plan, but it's not an up and down vote. I don't think I need to hear the answer to that because I know that we've all discussed it, but I do want it for the record in case somebody only hears this meeting to hear that. Could you go to the one slide before this? I just have some questions because, again, some language has changed. Frank, tell me what a residential unit is. 67 to 83.
This would be mostly either where the change is here is mostly in the downtown. So those would be probably apartment units, multifamily units. And the other place numbers have changed is in the two-family zone. So it could be a two-family house.
So it could be a house. It could be a two-family house. It could be one studio apartment somewhere.
Yes.
It could be a rental something or other. So a residential unit is as big or small. There's no sizing. So it could be a two-family house with two families.
Yes. It would generally, there's two areas of sort of incremental growth due to the zoning. And one is downtown. Those will be multifamily. They would probably be, studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. And then the other place is the T-zone, where we have suggested trying to modify some side yards, trying to make more of the T-zone legal, if you will, or able to get approvals. And also there's a special permit provision to legalize, if you have a 3-unit building, to sort of a pathway to a 3 unit by special permit of the planning board, if you had enough parking, for instance. So those are the places of growth.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the only places of growth, actually. And it gets back to a little bit of neighborhood preservation. We're making no changes at all in any single family zone in terms of density. We're trying to make life easier in the S75 zone, which used to be, close to an S50 zone, if I understood the building correctly. So there's no changes in those neighborhoods.
Okay, so your estimation for the children are based on
the number of units
of a 2-family with 2 families with 4 or 5 kids, or of one apartment with 1 kid, or you averaged it, or that's in the chapter and I just didn't.
Sorry, that is broken out for you in the DGIS in a table.
Okay.
In fact, we could send that table to you and highlight.
No. If you've got it in the chapters, it just means I have to.
Yeah. It's there.
I'm taking a note of it, and I'll look for it. I just wanted to be clear. What's missing for me here, and it's just considering it's a draft generic environmental impact statement. You talked about intersections traffic, but I don't see the number of cars that get increased out of this, like the parking issues that come out of this, because cars are actually, and I know it's not in environmental studies, but actually cars and houses, more than almost anything else, are the greatest polluters in our society. And yet I see children, I see public school because I know how important that is. I see the units so that there's a perspective that you're not talking about 200, 300, 400, who knows what, that people might get all upset about, but in fact that you're talking about less than 100 units here, right? So it's,
Yes.
you know, you're trying to have a perspective. We have a huge parking issue. In fact, one of the other initiatives that is on the table is all about parking. Did you include parking in this big presentation, and you left it out because you decided it wasn't important? Like, I would have thought I would have seen that here.
Yeah, by the way, we can put parking in here in this slide in the future. What George went through, give you an example of parking. Downtown, where much of this increase in units comes from, and that's the ability to make, we've recommended that residential in a downtown building become as of right. In other words, you don't need a special permit any longer to do it. We expect that a lot of the growth downtown in existing buildings as a result and a new building would be primarily residential, as opposed to, say, new offices, let's say. And we also think that we're trying to allow in the form-based zone services, a wide range of professional services, offices, as well as retail on the ground floor. What I'm getting at is that when you do a traffic analysis, and the reason traffic is not, and parking is not greatly sort of increased at all, is residential per 1,000 square feet. If I could try for a moment, per 1,000 square feet, residential has slightly less of a parking demand than commercial, than office, or certainly retail or services. I give you an example. Residential, you're going to get, you know, in 1,000 square feet, you'll probably get it enough for a, you know, 2-bedroom unit. 2-bedroom unit at most is going to need a parking spot downtown, maybe 2 at the most. 1,000 square feet of office will need 3 or 4 parking spots to support it. So the residential emphasis we have downtown, I know this is a little bit multifaceted, but is trying to respond to the marketplace. And actually, we view that kind of economic development as a taxpayer. It has so few children that it is going to pay a net surplus in taxes to the school district, and it will pay a net surplus to the village. And so that is a composite of downtown. Slightly less parking per 1,000 square feet, slightly more taxes to the school district. I mean, net tax.
Yeah.
School district.
I want to add in just real quick to respond kind of specifically to the parking problem. One thing that's not happening here. So we're not talking about not requiring parking in new buildings. A lot of the reason why there is parking issues in these neighborhoods is because the parking that is needed for the specific buildings, 1 and 2 family homes, it's just not provided on site. So all of the parking demand ends up spilling out onto the street because those houses many times were built before cars were, you know, being used. And so they don't have the ability to provide that parking on site. So while there is, I think, some proposed new demand that may come from new developments, there's nothing in here that talks about adding, you know, new units or sort of foreseeing new units that are not going to be required to comply with the parking requirements. And so from that end, while we haven't, you know, the DGS does not talk a lot about increased parking demand on the street or more difficult time finding parking in the future, that's because it's under the presumption that these buildings are going to have to provide parking in compliance with the requirements that exist now if it's a new building. That's different from what we have now. So, you know, where you have blocks of, you know, where nobody has parking, or, you know, where they do have parking, it's right in the front yard. So you have one space occupying a curb cut where a car could go then. right? And so it's not really, you know, building any efficiency into the parking that's taken off the street. That's not what we're doing here. That's not what the plan is calling for. That's not what, you know, when we get to the zoning, that's not what it's calling for there either. So.
Okay. Well, okay. I think I guess this will become a part of a zoning discussion. So that's fine. I was surprised not to see it on here because that is one of the sort of the big, if you want to talk about problems to be solved through a comp plan, parking becomes one of them, and this doesn't actually address. And frankly, comparing that commercial is worse, so this isn't so bad, is not actually an answer to anything I asked. But I'm okay, because I think what I'm hearing is that it'll be part of actually a zoning conversation. So those were just some of my comments. Look, I think the plan undertaking in the first place is huge. Do I think that this is exactly you know, like a slam dunk as far as covering where we'd like to be in 10 years. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I think as we go through it and hear from the public, we'll hear more about it. And, you know, I think this is a really well done job. So I really appreciate all the work that's going in here. Does anybody else in the gallery at all? We've spoken, trustees, everybody, is there any, can you take us back to the gallery? I'm sorry. Is there anybody else before we move on? I'm looking, I'm hearing nothing. Village manager, I guess it might be going back to you.
Okay, it's back to me, but before we go on to the next agenda item, I just want to clarify for the housekeeping. So I think based on what I heard, what would be helpful is looking at the PowerPoint and adding in the acronym page that we can add in and then post that. So that would be on the website if that could be done. Trustee Quesada, to your point about bullet points, I think that the presentation itself lays at least a very strong outline or format for that. So we could take, because it basically is a plan summary chapter by chapter. So we could look at that and then look at ways we might be able to get that information in different types of formats and use it in social media and other ways that we can communicate it.
Yeah, that could be definitely
Yeah,
part
and then
of it.
I think that would be fairly easy to translate too.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that, you know, part of it, obviously, we did talk about zoning, which is not part of this presentation, but I think is essential to kind of merge those two at some point, or it should be a different pamphlet or booklet by itself, because I think it's important for the community to understand what is also being proposed.
Right.
That is part of this plan, not part of this presentation, but it's part of the overall plan itself. So I think those are key components that need to be part of it. You know what, before we leave, and I'm sorry, Mayor, I just kind of, what you were talking remind me of something else, and Frank or anybody or Jaime, refresh my memory, because this is one thing that I have not been following, is in the town of Austin, because they are going through the same process, a little bit different than us, and they started in a different time frame period. But have you guys been following some of what the town has been doing? And if you guys have, what have you seen that it may be an impact to us at any level of within the next 10 years, sort of, you know, in a way? So what does that look like? And you don't have to answer me now, but just say, yes, we've been following, we'll be addressing, and then
I think the answer for me is that no. I believe that they started and stopped.
Well, they are still in sort of the engagement phase, so I'm not sure that we have much to compare to. But we are in, you know, we do converse periodically about it, and I think it's an important consideration. I think that they're dealing with, generally speaking, some of the same issues with regard to impact on school, parking, maybe not so much so.
No, actually, I actually think, Karen, that most of what they're dealing, I've been sitting in on these things, is environmental. Predominantly, I mean, they've chosen like imagine they've chosen one or two of our chapters. So they're not doing what we're doing, which is looking at entire
Right.
area. And we're not looking at everything either, but we've chosen, let's call it the 80-20 rule. But I've actually said in a couple of those things, I looked at the survey results. I think that most of it is actually environmental oriented.
Yeah,
And I think there's one more topic. I don't remember what it is. At some point, Karen, we probably should have you or somebody just say, like, we'd like to see, you know, at certain milestones. It would be silly. They're both called comprehensive plans, so it's confusing, but theirs is different. It's
yeah. They are also focusing, I know, on business development.
Yes.
You know, so there is some, you know, that they are looking at, I think, certain implications for residential housing as well, but it is a little bit of a different thrust because it's a very different, you know, the town, and when we say the town plan, it really is the unincorporated town, so that's
right.
very small part of the community, 5,000 to 6,000 residents, and a much more, far less dense. There's really, I'm sitting in the town right now, not a lot here. But you know, it all happens in the village, I guess. But
I do
we'll
think, though,
be in touch.
I
Yeah.
think, Karen, to Manny's point, some members of the public have commented, like, what a waste of money. Why aren't they doing this together? I don't think people really understand, in a sense. I mean, why would they? Who understands this stuff?
And you know,
But we should just address it at some point, even as an addendum to this. There are two separate, they have nothing to do with one another. There might be one place, frankly, what Briarcliff is doing affects us a bit more, to be honest with you, than what the town is doing. So they too are involved in something. So to Manny's point, we might at just some point make that, like, from a communications point of view, clear that same name, different animal.
So definitely the places where we intersect, the school district, the infrastructure, to a large degree, the waterfront, because we share the waterfront, environmental issues, there is an area of overlap. And then for town residents, so much of what they do in Ossining, they're doing in the village, because you have a different, you know, a different infrastructure, and we spend, as town residents, most of us spend a lot of time in the village. So you know, I think there's an opportunity, and hopefully, like, as we go forward, as we do more of the public engagement, I'm sure that the public will have questions about that, and we'll be able to address that. I think it's a very good point. And early on, we were in touch. I know that they are doing it. They're on a different process, so we're not really synced up well, but we can certainly regroup with them. We know where they work, so we'll be able to do that with no problem. But I just wanted to make sure that we had the housekeeping set up. And I think, you know, if BFJ can help with or do the translation of the first chapter, that will help. We'll obviously have a translation tool on the website like we did for all the other reports that we do, but for a technical document that might be a little challenging, we'll do our best to make sure that we communicate this in as many ways as possible. And I think that covers the housekeeping, but I just wanted to make sure going forward, we're all clear with that.
Yes, we're all shaking our heads. We're good.
Okay, great.
Are we ready to move on to the next topic?
Yes, so the next topic.
Well, I think I want to invite Frank and company to stay on for the most exciting part of the piece, but you could also leave.
You got me all.
I do want to thank them for being here. So, so thank them, and also thank Pat Yost, our co-chair on the committee. You can stay. We're going to be talking about cabaret licenses next, and I believe we have four of them today.
Yes.
So we'll be starting it with 3 Westerly. So I'm going to turn this over to Corporation Counsel and Police Chief Sylvester to discuss our first of 4 cabaret licenses.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye.
Yeah.
See you, Frank. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
The cabaret licenses we have tonight, folks, are all renewals. The first is for 3 Westerly. They are seeking a cabaret license to operate Monday through Sunday from noon until 2 a.m. The application was vetted both by OPD and by the building department. No issues popped up, and we're just want to apprise the board. I have the chief here, and we can have a resolution for the board next week. As I said, this is a renewal of a prior granted cabaret license.
So Chief, anything to add?
Been a long time since anybody's referred to me as the most exciting part of a meeting, but here I am.
Well,
no,
let's put that one on record then.
3 Westerly is not someplace that we typically have complaints regarding their cabaret. From time to time, music will reverberate and get to people that live at Westerly, and we solve those issues. Tierras Tropicalis had been problems years ago, and Claudio, the owner there, has worked with us as best as he can to solve those issues. He's made a lot of changes to the way he does business. The Elks Lodge, Johnny G is not here, so let's talk about him. He's a neighborhood nuisance and a real problem, but still, I think we can handle that one. And Karma Lounge has had some issues over the. I hope Johnny G watches this.
It's already on Facebook, my friend.
Somebody please tell him I said something crazy about him. Karma Lounge has had some complications over the past year or so. They're mostly outside, and to be frank, they're not necessarily related to the business. It's patrons that sometimes get intoxicated and go outside and do crazy stuff. As I've said before, nothing good happens late at night. Some say after midnight, some say after 2 a.m., whatever your time is for bad things happening. I mean, the reality is that with nightlife and alcohol, sometimes comes fights and other antisocial behavior. So Karma really has tried to comply as best as they can. Sometimes you can't control the people that come to your establishment and the things they do. So they've had a couple of bumps in the road, but all in all, they've made a pretty good effort to try and work with us, not against us.
And folks, just since the chief's gone through the others, let me just let you know, for Tierras Tropicales, they are, again, a renewal. They are looking to operate Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 8 p.m. until 2 a.m. Elks Lodge, which is also a renewal, is looking to operate Thursday and Saturday from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. Karma Lounge actually had a longer period of time than we permit under our code. So it would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from noon till midnight, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday from noon until 2 a.m. Would be for Karma Lounge. The redacted police reports that were received for both Tierras Tropicales and Karma Lounge are here. I should note, and I think the chief will back this up on me, with regard to Karma Lounge, that relates to 175 Main Street. So we're not necessarily talking about Karma Lounge. We're talking about things that happen with that being the address. With Tierras Tropicales, because there are other venues in that area, sometimes you get, it's not necessarily Tierras Tropicales, it's more necessarily the address. So I just want that pointed out, but we provided you with the redacted police reports for both of those locations. And again, as I said at the start, these are all renewal applications.
Great. Anybody, questions or comments on the board? No? Okay. Thank you. So this is going on, Stuart, for next week, yes?
I will have 4 resolutions for you next week.
Great. Thank you. I think, what else do we have, folks?
We have a brief discussion on, it's sort of, as Trustee Fritchie and I have called it, a soft launch, so to speak, on the venturing crew. And as a parent of someone who was a member of the venturing crew and has since then is both a volunteer firefighter and a paramedic, it's really wonderful. The venturing crew, and Trustee Fritchie can add more to this, has been operated under the auspices of the Boy Scouts of America. With the recent issues with the Boy Scouts, particularly their bankruptcy, that really has sort of ground to a halt. We can't get new members in, we can't do many things. So the thought was to essentially keep the idea of a venturing crew, but instead of having BSA be the sponsor, essentially run it through the fire department and essentially through the village. They do have a series of bylaws that Trustee Fritchie will get from me. What we would like to do is at the 24th work session to have some of the leaders, the adult leaders for the venturing crew, come and explain what the program is. It's really a wonderful program, and it does expose both young men and young women. This was one of the few co-ed parts of Boy Scouts to basically different programs, and specifically with regard to fire activities when it's run through a fire department. So it's really a valuable program. It does provide a feeder for Ossining for future firefighters, and you'll notice, as Trustee Fritchie reminded me, we don't have signs out which says, you need to join up and, come, because we have people who want to join. And one of the ways they do it is through this. But because of the issues with Boy Scouts, we've been unable to essentially keep that going. So this would, continue the program. I have spoken with our insurance broker, and as I commented to Trustee Fritchie, insurance brokers are like attorneys. They always look at the worst possible things that can happen. And we did go over a couple of things, many of which, though, are dealt with through our own insurance coverage. Now, one of the things we would want to make sure is that the adult leaders do have the appropriate training on dealing with children. There is training that is already given through various organizations. I would not be surprised that these folks already got it through the BSA, but we can find out about that. But that's really the long and short of it, is that we want to continue the program, or we'd like the board to endorse continuing the program, but this way do it essentially directly, under OFD auspices. It is not a program that the village is paying for, from what Trustee Fritchie has advised. Part of the 2% fund that the fire department gets directly from the state through insurance premium payments is used for this. And there are events that are done at each of the 9 houses. So it's really, very, very helpful. Trustee Fritchie, if I've missed anything, please.
No, I think you covered it very well and eloquently, a little more than better than me. This, since its inception, and the reason why the connection with the BSA was originally a very dear friend of mine started this and passed from cancer, and we kept it going, and it's going on through some ups and downs. We're very strong right now. Since its inception, we've probably brought in up to 50 to 60 members through this organization, both male and female, and good members. Basically, they can come in when they're 14, and when they turn 18, they can join a department, or they're allowed to stay till they're 21 when they age out. We've got a little bit of homework to do, what our application will look like, and this, that, and the other thing. I am actually meeting Sunday morning with all the advisors and the chiefs, and we're going to cross the T's and dot the I's. And so when they appear in front of you on the 24th, they'll be ready to make a presentation. They're all nervous. They're like, what do we got to do? I'm like, easy. I just want you to go on there and explain what you do from when they first come in, and we teach them the basics of how to put turnout gear on, how to use a Scott pack. I mean, we go through a gauntlet, and as Stuart said, each month it bounces around. It goes around all the companies, and those officers of those companies are responsible to hold the training. And it could be from, we do a CPR. It could be a simulated live burn, a bunch of pallets, and we get them used to holding the hose line, to using forcible entry tool. It's the sky's the limit for us to train these kids, and you'd be surprised. I think there's more girls in there right now than there is boys. So it's a great thing. It's a big feeder program for us. And, right now our hands are tied, can't get applications. And so I finally said, what, we've been talking about this for years, trying to do this. And I think now's the time. So, we're looking for your support, and like I said, I will guide them through this process as best I can, so they're ready for you on the 24th. So, and that's basically it.
So, if I may, ask a couple. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Always a sad day. Boy Scouts, the bankruptcy, etc., was very sad news in this country, I think. Having said that, kudos to taking on piece of it. So just a couple of questions before we make everyone nervous on the 24th. The program is somewhat, when you and I spoke, it's a bit of a mentorship program. Yes, it's tactics, it's operations, and you take them under your wing so that there is some support of how it all works, and then how they might become volunteers. In order for the teens, because that's what they are, right? The teenagers, are they residents of Ossining only into this program?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are other municipalities taking the baton that other companies elsewhere?
Croton runs on, I'm not sure if I think it's a junior firefighter course.
Yeah, Bob, they do explorers through junior firefighters.
You're right. So, but they're structured differently.
Okay.
At 16, they can actually go take firefighter 1. We don't want that. We want to keep it basically like it is.
Okay.
And control the outcome. So when they're 18, if they're ready to go and they want to join a hose company or a ladder company, be my guest, put your application in.
Great. So then I have 2 more questions. Number 1, why are you coming in front of the Board of Trustees? If the village isn't paying for it, where is our responsibility? Why are we speaking about it as trustees? Why isn't the fire department just doing it, if you will?
Well, Stuart, you can answer that one.
I think the best answer for that, Mayor, is it is a new program that's going to go through the fire department. It is true that the funding does not come from the village. We just thought it would be, and I thought it would be good to get basically the villages, if you want to call it imprimatur, to say that this is really something that we would like to do. Because it is, what it's going to be is, now if, you're under the auspices of BSA. Now you can be under the auspices of the fire department. Since the fire department is technically under the village, it becomes in essence sort of a village program. It's not a youth program in that sense through rec, but it is a program through the fire department. And as the fire department is one of the agencies of the village, I thought it would be more appropriate to at least have the village, hear it out and basically, just, indicate that they're okay with it. And then, they can go forward. One of the things I'm going to look at is obviously the bylaws, the application form, which just has to be changed a little bit. But that's why I wanted it to come before the board.
Okay. And lastly, Bob, you and I had a brief conversation about this. So I am very interested in jobs, more jobs, and more jobs. And one of the ways people and teenagers set themselves up for the future is through access to employment. While you're all volunteers, and we thank people for their service, in cities, they're actually pretty nice paying jobs. So my question is there an element to this that's beyond being a volunteer fire department where in Ossining, a teenager, do you also partake in mentorship to then look at this is a career move? Would there be opportunities with the Youth Bureau to possibly coordinate some efforts? Because you may be getting teens who normally may not have this kind of access. I'm glad you're doing more and more girls, because when I grew up, I don't think there were any women fire department, which means 2 things. I'm pretty old, and 2, that there's been efforts to bring in women, because there are actually good careers, like in New York City. So is there part of that kind of development as access to careers, or is that a little beyond the scope of what you guys do?
I wouldn't say it's beyond the scope.
Okay.
We do get the ones that are really interested are what we call buffs, that sleep with a radio on all night and they don't miss a call. They come to you, yo, did you hear this? We try to lead them if they're that interested and want to be a firefighter for a career. We give them the information for the county tests. Take this test, take that, take them all, take all tests, take the corrections test. Just take these tests. It's good to practice and because we all know how the list go, you gotta have that score.
Right.
So we help them with that. We've had police come out of it. We've had state troopers come out of it, county cops.
Okay.
Correction. I mean,
So there is
well,
a mentoring piece to it. It
yeah,
might be now that it's maybe with the village as we move forward. Hopefully we'll move forward. I'm not voting for all 5 of us. Maybe we can add that element and that element of inclusion as well, so that we might open some doors for people that maybe didn't even know there were careers like these available to them.
If we have access, we could do a career night one training,
Great.
And incorporate it into our training program.
So once Stuart looks to the bylaws, we'll go next steps. So thank you. Those were the totality of my questions. Does anyone else have any questions? And I guess the 24th is beginning to sound like a very busy evening from what I'm seeing. Is there a time frame here, by the way, gentlemen? Is there like a time?
No, not so to speak, but we're just trying to,
okay.
The discussion's been had, the chiefs are all on board, the advisors are all on board, and they're ready to move. Again, we will meet Sunday and have all any questions answered and anything like redoing the application and, anything like that. And, I've been in communication with Stuart, and if I have a question, I say, Stuart, what about this? And it's all good.
Good.
And Mayor, if I might, just from a personal note, as I said, my son was in the venturing crew. He then became an EMT, then a paramedic, was the chief of the paramedics up at SUNY Albany, and now works full time as a paramedic.
And he was in our company too.
That's right.
Washing hook and ladder.
That's right. So, and that was, I want to say, directly because of the venturing program.
No, I'm totally hearing that. That's
that was what was, and they.
I think it's great.
In that direction.
I think it's great, but I don't want to be biased. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Stuart. I only have one question, and it's if you can tell me a little bit about whether there will be any connection between the venturing crew and the Youth Bureau.
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna say once we hopefully establish that we are going to be with the village, that is something that we could put together. And again, that could be a crossover training, or we could go there one night. They could come to us one night and, do a soft introduction so it could mesh. And who knows, we might add a youth bureau. We might have 5 members come over, it's and vice versa. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But in terms of partnership, that makes sense. But in terms of structure, the Youth Bureau is going to be a separate thing, doing its own separate thing. This will be a separate thing, and it'll just be kind of these programmatic overlaps, but there won't be any administrative overlaps. Is that right?
I would think so, yes.
No, there wouldn't be administratively, no, because the fire department's just we have our set of advisors. We have 5 or 6 advisors that run the program.
And you take in all the applications.
Yes, we do all
decisions on them.
Yes, we do all the work. And as in reference to the 2% money, it's pizza money. It's not even, it's nothing. The commissioners give us a little budget out of the 2% money, which is really minimal. And they buy pizza. Sometimes the companies put a meal on for the kids and they don't charge us. It's because they know what the bottom line is here. We all work together. We're a family.
For sure. What did you say, Karen?
I was just saying that they would be two separate administrative entities, but I do think the idea of trying to cross-pollinate and share resources to whatever degree is possible is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. I agree.
This is true. I'm looking forward to hearing from them, from the folks on the 24th. Hopefully it'll be the 24th. That's why I said about the timing. Is everybody
on the
asked?
24th?
Well, that's what I heard Stuart and Bob say.
I think we can say this. If that's a very busy night,
it is going to be a very busy night.
Richie and I don't think have a problem.
Yes.
We could put it. We can put that to March 10th. If we
could also maybe do it within us, a legislative session too. So
it's not. It won't be long. It's brief. It's
we could do it under the the public invited organizational
business.
Right.
Yeah. We do it in a new business session too. So we'll do it. I don't want to put it off.
Well, that's why I brought it up twice. I didn't know if you heard me the first time, Karen. Apparently you didn't. You heard it the second time.
I heard it.
I was giving you the baton about the 24th. You didn't grab it the first time, but you grabbed it the second time.
I was a little slow on the uptake there, but yes.
That's okay. Okay.
All right.
This is terrific new stuff. Lovely stuff. I'm sure lovely was not the word Bob was looking for, but it's the word I'm going to use. Anybody else? Okay. Not seeing anyone else. I am thinking we are done with tonight and we are going to adjourn. Yes, Stuart?
Yes, Mayor. This would be to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel regarding particular persons and for matters of litigation.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? I didn't hear you, Dana. You were on mute.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. If I may just say good night, and we hope to see everyone back here next Wednesday. Enjoy President's Day weekend. Think about the lives of all our presidents, because that's actually what it's for. And enjoy some downtime as well. The village will be closed on Monday, so have a good evening, everyone. I'll talk to everybody next week, I guess.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.